Okay, and I'll count backwards. Ready? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hi, guys. Welcome to today's podcast of YarninBlak. Today, I've got a great friend on, Janet. I'll introduce you to her in a minute, but I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land that I'm currently calling in from. I'm here in Baldwin Kew on the land of the Wurundjeri people. I want to pay respect to elders past, present, and emerging, but also want to acknowledge any other Aboriginal people that are here today. I would like to also add that our land was never ceded. So without any further ado, I would like you to meet my guest for today. Janet, how are you?
I'm excellent, thank you. How are you?
I'm fine. Welcome and thank you for joining us today. But I'll get you to introduce yourself. Who are you? Where you're from?
I'm Janet Bromley. I'm a Yorta Yorta artist woman. I'm currently living on Jaja country and pay my respects to Jara people and ancestors, elders and emerging young people. Things are changing up here and the young people are doing awesomely. I really like that part. I grew up in South Gippsland. Yep. I spent most of my working life in Melbourne and I came up here about 11 years ago. I'd been made redundant from a community managed mental health service and I couldn't get a job, so I thought I'd come up here. My daughter has a what am I going to do?
Okay, it froze for a second.
Yep.
So it froze after you said I moved up here. So we'll take it from there.
Yep.
Okay.
I moved up here to, I thought, help my daughter out, who has a large blended family. And I wanted to get some work or something to do because it's a lot of work doing that as a grandmother. And so I went to uni. So I was at uni for 8 years.
Yeah. What did you study?
I got a Bachelor of Creative Arts with honours and a Master's in Art, Visual Art, by research. And it sort of culminated that's my, I've done all the working part and this is what I want for myself. And I ended up working for Bendigo City Council.
Yeah.
I have flipped back to the family. I have 2 children and multiple grandchildren and a great-grandchild. So a big, strong family. Yeah. And I started working for the council and my role was is the First Nations Arts Officer, and my role was to put in place a First Nations art gallery in Bendigo.
Yeah. Yeah. And how did that go?
It went really well. Through my time at university, and because my daughter was up here, I knew a lot of people up here. I looked for the Aboriginal art community. Yeah. And during university, I took over the NAIDOC Week exhibition up here, which was quite excellent. I ran for the whole of NAIDOC for 10 days and took that over, took it into Dudley House, which is more of a gallery type of environment for people. And so I had a list of First Nations artists already. And the offer came when Bendigo Art Gallery decommissioned their art space in the Visitors Centre, which had been for historic things that they had in their collection. And it was vacant. And we took over that space. Quite quickly, like it was within 18 months, we had our first exhibition.
Awesome. Awesome.
So since then, I think I started off with 20 artists, and when I left, because I've left now, I've retired, I had 60 artists in the books who are First Nations people with their feet on the ground on Jara country.
Wow. That's an
amazing... From all over, yeah. From all over Australia, yeah. And just starting now to pick up the young ones.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to take you back in time for a little bit because I want to ask you a couple of questions. One, where did you go to school growing up?
As a kid, I grew up in South Gippsland in Curramborough. I did my primary and secondary education in Curramborough.
Yep. Now, while you were there, was any Aboriginal studies taught at school?
Not at all. No, not at all. Even we, as my grandmother was stolen generation, it was just whispered in our family. I grew up in a family of there's 6 girls and 1 boy. So we kids talked about it, but we didn't talk about it with my mother because it was a taboo subject.
Yeah.
Reflecting back, everybody knew, except we didn't know that they knew, which is really So I guess in some ways that helped us to just move on with our lives. It was a good town. There could have been some things that were racist happened to us, but I don't think so. Yeah. Except in the area of sport, because my brother and my sister were very fast runners, but other people got chosen over the top of them. So, yeah, and we didn't go out very often. We're on a dairy farm, so we had the whole farm. That's where I learned to have my feet on the ground. That country belonged to us, and we explored it to all over. And we went out a little bit. When I think about what other people did in their young people's lives in regard to their community surrounding them, we didn't do a lot of that stuff. However, my mum was a hidden artist, and every year we'd come to Melbourne and go to art galleries and museums and go and see Melbourne Town Hall and go and see all of these things. It was just a given that's what would happen. I often talk to people now and who say they never did anything like that. And that sort of consolidated I guess, in some ways, that creative outlook in all of us. We're not all artists, but we all have a creative outlook.
Yeah. So when you were in high school, were you very arty then?
I was doing art, but I've always been doing something quite different. My sister Lorraine, she was always the artist of the family in drawing and painting. I was more of a builder and maker, and a builder and a maker in the odd way. So if I put these 2 things together, what will they look like? So I didn't have a planned outcome, and I did a lot of I used to get pieces of wood out of the wood stack for the fire and chop them up and make them into people and those sort of things. So I didn't see myself as an artist, but I always knew I was a maker.
Yeah.
Which when I went to university, the making part was the part that I went to.
Yeah. Yeah. So how old were you when you started uni?
60.
Yeah, wow. I know you would have been a very mature age student there.
Yep.
How did you blend in with the other students?
To be truthful, I didn't blend in with people between 35 and 55. Because I was making craft and I was at uni, they didn't know why I was there. But I got on really well with the young people. And as soon as the conversation turned to art and art making, we were all on the same level. And the people that I class as friends from that time mostly are really young people.
Yeah.
Which has been a really interesting. I have a preference for young people, or I like hanging around with young people. I like listening to our future from those young people. So that's what I've always thought. When my first grandchild was born, which was a shock to me that I was going to be a grandmother, I thought, oh, this is a way for me to interfere in the future. So, and I've always felt like that, and giving a hand up or giving some sort of supportive thing to young people goes down really well, but it doesn't go down as well if the person is an already established artist and they're more mature. because they're you know, what's she talking about? She doesn't even know how to paint.
What I love about art is, as you kind of mentioned before, art is so creative. Art doesn't just have to be painting art. Art
Yep.
can be music, dance, song, poetry. Are we seeing a huge talent of First Nations young people coming through in different aspects of art?
In this last couple of years, there's more young people. Up here at Bendigo, all the kids who go to Year 11 and Year 12 come to the same school, which is a campus in Bendigo CBD. And their art room is astonishing, amazing. And we do get a reasonable amount of kids, but it's about what they think about themselves, because they still carry our hesitance to put yourself out in front, and they don't know the words to support themselves to talk about their art, and they still have sort of liken it a bit to a cloak, like it's a way to protect yourself, but it also keeps you away from things.
Yeah.
So I talk to young people all the time, because I believe in our DNA we have communication by song, dance and mark making.
Yeah.
And I talk to young people about that all the time. And I also talk to young people about, if they can tap into some of those things, not only can they, you know, possibly supplement their income, but their mental health is so much better. I don't think that the health area talks enough about how art can be a thing that is a buffer for young people.
Yeah.
And it's not about them all wanting to present it to the world. It's about them feeling that they can actually do it.
Yeah.
Because as an artist, it's all about yourself. So you do something and you think, oh, this is good, I'm going to put it out. And then as soon as you put it out there, you think, oh, no. There's a very, very fraud thing happens with most artists, but with mob, it's really strong.
Yeah.
And I like to talk to people about, you know, how do they deal with that for themselves.
Yeah. And art is such a, well, I always say art is the expression of thoughts and feelings. And mental health, the first things that get affected with mental health are your thoughts and your feelings.
Yep.
So you are right when people use art as therapy sometimes, but you can use art as therapy when you are unwell, but you can also use it to stay and maintain good mental health.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. Creative people should never, I've met some people who've left behind that creative aspect of their life.
Yeah.
And I just keep saying, you have to keep it up. You have to do something in that creative area, because it's about your well-being. And, you know, when you create something, you become so absorbed in what you're doing, at times you don't know what time it is.
Yeah.
You know, whether it's any sort of creativity that you do, and I know people that I've talked to who are poets and writers and all sorts of things, it becomes it overwhelms all the rest, and the chatter in the head and stuff is not getting through.
Yeah. Yeah. So I've got a couple of questions to ask you. One is that there's some terms thrown around a lot, like cultural safety, for example. What makes you feel culturally safe going to a service? Any service?
Now it's completely different from when I was younger.
Yeah.
Now my age, because I feel old enough now to say things, which is really weird to be old enough, like you could do that all your life.
Yeah.
But I think seeing signs up, seeing some art around, seeing a bit of language makes a really big difference, and it doesn't have to be a lot.
Yeah.
If a service or an organisation or a doctor's surgery is going to put those things on their wall, they have an understanding that is a comfort or makes a place for people.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll flip it around then. What are some places, not name them, but what places kind of make you feel culturally unsafe?
Schools were and still are a big thing.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of schools who don't do any of that acknowledgement.
Yeah.
And I quite freely move in and out of schools up here now, but there's some schools who are not embracing. And I think the other thing is too, it's not just about mob, it's about people from other countries as well, that they don't embrace difference as much as they should, especially when you're thinking of an education area.
Yeah.
University can be like that really big time, and going into a unit of study where people don't understand where you're coming from, especially as a First Nations person. I was told at one stage doing visual art that I shouldn't be talking about my family and telling everybody that I was Aboriginal by person. I was thinking, oh my God, get out of my way. Because you sort of, let's talk about uni, you're locked into an area of study that's quite narrow. And once you get into that area of study, the more you do it, the more narrow it gets. And it's easy to dismiss and push things out that are not called as belonging to that particular subject. So and I think that's about the age and the framework that the lecturers and tutors come to you, and that's about what happens everywhere. It's about the framework of how they put things together and how they present to you, and also about being closed-minded. And you would expect in this day and age that would have diminished, but I don't. This not naming just universities, but all sorts of things. There's some people who never change their mind about anything.
Yeah,
I've had people come into the art gallery and say, "We never learned any of this at school."
Yeah.
I said to them, "Well, you need to go back and do some learning." And I don't.
There's lots of young people or lots of Aboriginal people that are just discovering their Aboriginality, but don't know where to start exploring it. If they said to you, Auntie, where would I start? What would be your advice?
I've been doing this a lot lately. First of all, they need to know that it's a really long journey and it's not going to be solved quickly. And going back to your own country as a stranger is quite difficult. So I suggest people go and do their research. All my research into my family was done, first of all, through birth and death certificates, and I've got birth and death certificates back to my Yorta Yorta apical ancestor.
Yeah.
Not everybody can do that, but it's a way for, it was the way that I needed to do it for myself. Everything I attended, I got so enmeshed in what I was doing that everything I attended where there were mob there, I listened to what everybody said. And if somebody said something that triggered a thought for me, I would go and speak to those people. And I'm not, until the last probably 5 years, I was quite introverted, but I knew that I needed to go where the information was.
Yeah.
So, and I guess the other thing is you need to know what you need to ask those people. Mm. So for young people talking about it, I tell them this is what I did.
Yeah.
And also, I also say to them, they need to stand strong in who they are or who they think they are as a person, because there's lots of things that can knock them back. But my feelings as a person of fulfillment, when it's really interesting what fulfills you. I took my mother in her 80s to see her first blood cousin. She knew who they were all of her life, and she'd never spoken to any of them. And I took her to meet Uncle Eric, and he just patted her hand, and they patted each other, and they smiled, and they talked for a long time. And my mother's almost her whole being changed in those moments. I could see her be different.
Yeah.
And I knew that I'd done my job now.
Yeah.
I've got Mum back connected to those. It was like a completion for me. Yeah. But I met him through going to the Koori Heritage Trust and doing a family meeting. And I met a member of his family there with our ancestral names on. So you have to be back. You can't stay back. You have to ask questions, but you really need to know what your questions are. So when I'm talking to young people, I know some young people who just went back to Tasmania and met family, and it's just amazing to hear them talk about it, that they've talked about, but also there's sort of an edge to their voice where they don't belong. And when they find out, it's just amazing. And it's not a necessity in life to complete yourself, but it's bloody good when you do.
Yeah. And I think that what people don't always get is that for a lot of Aboriginal people, we are on life journeys. So we are actually exploring Aboriginality ourselves.
Yep.
It doesn't just come with the rule book.
Yep.
And it's okay to mess up, and it's okay not to get it right all the time. But we've got guidance of elders, and we've got guidance of following cultural protocols that we may not know. Might have to learn them at the same time.
Yep.
But we need to find the people that can help us guide us in that journey.
Yeah. And that thing about this barriers from what's happened before that we've inherited from our parents and our grandparents, they're the things that stand in the way for people to not feel comfortable about asking those questions. But if they don't ask those questions, they will never find out. Yeah. And so I just say, go to everything. I've learnt a lot of information about my family by going to forums and lectures and talking to people. And if one elder isn't encompassing your idea, find another one. Yeah. Find other people. Don't be put off by one person, because that person's carrying all that stuff as well. Yeah. So one of the things that one of the barriers is because we all carry stuff from our parents, grandparents and great-grandparents from that history, and people can be very direct, shall I say. So I talk to young kids all the time about this. Find out what history is, learn about it, speak about it, talk to me about it. Also, be aware that sometimes you don't need to tell everybody.
Yeah.
Have even with our art, people who are in the art space, we do profiles because it becomes interesting for people to come in and look at artwork. And I talk to people about what they should give away and what they should keep for themselves. So sometimes I'll turn up with a whole summary of their whole everything, and I say, you don't need to tell people this stuff. You don't need to tell all of these things. It's great you've written it down, but let's pull something out of there that you give to other people, and and stuff that you keep for yourself, because I think it's important to have your own story, your own inner story about yourself that you don't actually share with everybody.
And some of that self-preservation as well.
Yeah.
Once your story's out there, it can be criticized, it can be pulled apart, it can be questioned.
Yep.
And a lot of us have learnt that the hard way, right? But it's really important to explain that to young kids. Is you do want your story out there, but do they need to know it all at once? Do they need to
Yes.
know it like
Yeah.
today, or is it your journey of revealing stuff as it's needed?
Yeah. When they really young ones were coming into my into an exhibition, I'd say to them, you can have the smallest story. It's gold to people who want to know stuff. You know, like they don't need to know everything, because what the smallest story you give them is things that they don't know.
Yeah.
And they can come into a gallery space and see those profiles, and they can build a picture because everybody's got this small amount of information on there. So you don't have to be the person who gives everybody everything.
Yeah. Another question for you. Reconciliation is a huge word.
Mm.
What does it mean to you?
If it was done properly, and if you go, if it was done properly, it'd be great.
Yeah.
And I talk to people now, especially young people, all the time, and say, you know, you don't have to reconcile with anybody. You didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah.
And you haven't done anything to interfere with somebody's life. The people who need to be doing the reconciling are other people. I just think it's gone into a place where it's a word, and that organisations and councils then assume that Aboriginal people will do it for them.
Yeah.
And
it's not our place to reconcile.
no, not at all. Not at all.
What are we reconciling?
Yes, and particularly with people who haven't been, young people, they don't know that. They hear the words and they hear what it's about a little bit. They don't go into study the full thing. So, yes, it's not about us. It's about other people who need to do that. A lot of other people don't do it, but you don't have to help them unless they're paying you money. I always say to them. Unless they're paying you money.
I always add too that sometimes I think the first form of reconciliation for non-Indigenous people is to reconcile what Aboriginal issues mean to you.
Yeah,
what
that's
Aboriginal history mean to you. Get your head around it yourself.
Yeah.
Before you start reconciling with the community out there.
Yep.
Have understandings yourself. Reconciliation starts within yourself.
Yeah. I'm really surprised how much people don't know. Like, white people don't know anything, but I'm really surprised with our young people who don't know things.
Yeah.
And how surprised and shocked. Sometimes they're completely shocked when you have a full conversation about those things. And I've recommend all sorts of reading and books, and sometimes they're too hard yards. Like, I read a lot of Henry Reynolds, and that's hard work. It's good, but it's hard work. So coming to, you know, when they do the even just children's books that talk about dreaming stories and those sort of things, then I did a project at a school, and we did the dreaming story about the two volcanoes, and that was really interesting because one of the teachers wanted to know what that was about. What's that about? What, you know, why are they talking about like that? And at that period of time, it came up that archaeologists had found a spear or something underneath the lava over in Western Australia, Western Victoria.
Yeah.
And I said, you know, there were Aboriginal people around then. This is a fallacy about oral history not being true history. I just say to people, imagine if the only thing you had was the land and the sky and the sea. And at night time, as kids, you're all cuddled up there. All of your family are there, which is another thing that young people really like to hear. And they're talking about the stars, and they're talking about places they've been, and they're building those stories in your head from when you're really little, because that's the only thing you hear. We are inundated with everything these days, and it's hard to find a space in your head that's like when you get to our age. You're not as old as me, but there's no vacant space in there for anything.
Yeah.
But building an oral history starts at birth.
Yeah.
And, you know, cautioning about floods and drought and volcanoes and all those sort of things. I just think it's amazing how that happens, but I also see how it could really happen really easily because they have nothing else to interfere with that.
Yeah.
Until white people came here.
Yeah.
And when young people go back and connect with family and start hearing some of the stories from elders, like the young people I said went back to Tasmania, they've got a really different attitude to who they are and how they belong there when they come back. They get a real sense of this is our place. There's also a knowing that those things are true, I think, in us. Yeah, so
that's really good. I like that. I've got a couple of questions for you before we need to wrap up. But one of the questions is that what would you like to see changed in Aboriginal affairs in Australia? And if I gave you a magic wand, which I've got one here, a magic wand and $1 zillion, and said you could change something, what would you want to change?
I'd want to change two things.
Yeah.
Once I would want prep grade children learning about Aboriginal culture and learning about it all the way through their schooling.
Yeah.
So that becomes history to everybody, not just Aboriginal children, but everybody. That just becomes history. That's what history is. This is what happens, you know, in England, in Europe. They know what's gone on in the past. And people make their choice about how they feel about that, but they know that it's true. And the other thing I would like to do is I'd just love it if all community could be involved in things and not just selected few. And the reasons for the selected few are often about this is a big country. And how do we gather all those people together? How do we give out messages to everybody? And sometimes the delay in bringing messages is the thing that means other people have known that before me, and it's is it true? I don't know. I just love to see way more happening right across, especially in Victoria, because it's not. Everything is so disjointed. Everybody's so disjointed here that when you get into the people who aspire to do higher roles are not necessarily like that, but people, normal everyday people on the ground, some of them don't. Some Aboriginal people don't even know what happened.
Yeah,
and you know how to they don't know how to break the chains of what's come from the past. And some people get really angry with me about that because I'm just, you know, I guess in some ways they think I'm wanting to dismantle their families, but it's not that. It's like, come be more open and greet the brand new world and let us make a place in it, a proper one that brings everybody on the journey.
Yeah, that's a good place to end on right there. But I want to ask you a final question: is what would you like people to walk away with from our yarn this morning?
I think that's part of what I just said. That support the young people, listen to what people have to say, find your person who's your person who will help you, support you to move on to the next level. Don't be put off if you come across things that you think there's a few people I know who they've been scared off by a couple of elders, and I say to them, just don't go and find another elder.
And sometimes elders are scary. Sometimes elders are scary.
Absolutely. They're doing that for a reason, but you don't, you know, you just go find someone else to talk to. I think that, you know, like sharing for and looking after each other, I guess it's really important. And send your kids to university.
Yeah.
Because that's the way we'll make really big change if more of our children end up in teaching roles, in doctors and nurses and all of the roles that people could go into. We need more of our young people going to uni.
Yeah. And that might take a little bit of time.
Yeah.
Because we know that year 12 articulation is still a little bit behind in closing the gap.
Yep.
But we're still not getting kids to year 12, then we're not going to be able to get them to university and TAFE and get into some of those courses just yet. But we are starting to see change, which is a good thing.
Yeah. And remember, I went back to uni when I was 60, so anybody can do it at any time.
You can do it. Anybody can do it.
Absolutely.
Hey, I want to say thank you for joining me on my podcast today. It's a pleasure to have you on. You do know I cyber stalk you a little bit, so I do know who you are. I love all the work that you do. So thank you, Janet, for joining us, Aunty. And yeah, guys, I'll see you at the next podcast. Thanks heaps.
Thank you for having me. Bye-bye.